In a world where order reigns supreme, how far can obedience go before it erases who we truly are? General Zod is more than just a military leader, he embodies a mind consumed by a system demanding absolute loyalty, a loyalty that challenges identity itself. Prepare to uncover the hidden side of discipline, where control over the mind is the real battlefield, and the lines between duty and self disappear forever. The story begins in a world where structure is everything, where strict rules govern every movement and decision. This is a place where questioning authority is almost unheard of, where discipline is not merely encouraged but demanded without exception. General Zod was born into such an environment, a realm built on unwavering loyalty and obedience. From his earliest days, he was not just raised, he was shaped, forged in a system that prized conformity above all else. The military world was not simply a backdrop to his life, it was the very foundation upon which his identity would be constructed, or more precisely, deconstructed. In this rigid environment, the concept of self was not a priority. Instead, the system demanded a singular focus, the collective goal, the mission, the chain of command. Zod learned early that his worth was measured by his ability to follow orders without hesitation, to suppress any flicker of doubt or individuality. Psychologists describe this as a form of cognitive conditioning, where the mind learns to silence internal conflict in favor of external demands. This meant replacing personal feelings and moral considerations with the cold logic of duty. For young Zod, this wasn't just schooling, it was survival. The military hierarchy was a well-oiled machine designed to shape not just behavior but belief. Doubt was seen as weakness, hesitation, a betrayal. Within this framework, Zod's personality began to take form, not as a free agent, but as a vessel of obedience. His thoughts became synchronized with the rhythm of orders given and executed, a process so ingrained that questioning seemed almost unnatural. Yet, beneath the polished surface of perfect discipline, there was a subtle unrest brewing, a tension between the demands of the system and the remnants of a suppressed self. This paradox of power through submission was the true heart of the system's influence. Strength was cultivated not by freedom, but by strict control. Power was not born from choice, but from enforced loyalty. As Zod grew, the pressure to conform intensified, tightening like a vice around his sense of identity. Each lesson, each command drilled into him chipped away at the possibility of independent thought. But every structure, no matter how rigid, holds within it the seeds of change. Unseen and unspoken, something began to stir beneath the surface of his mind, a force that neither Zod nor those around him yet understood. The foundation of his world was both a prison and a forge, shaping him into a figure of order, but also isolating him from the full experience of being human. And as the cracks in his mind slowly appeared, no one noticed the beginning of a transformation that would challenge everything the system had built. But there was something no one saw coming. The moment of fracture arrived not with a bang, but a quiet shift, subtle yet irreversible. For General Zod, the trigger was not an external enemy, but an internal conflict brewing beneath layers of discipline and control. After years of absolute obedience, a sudden challenge to the system's infallibility cracked the foundation of his beliefs. It began as a simple order that felt wrong, a contradiction that stirred something buried deep within his psyche, doubt. In the military world, doubt is dangerous. It threatens to unravel the carefully woven fabric of loyalty and structure. Zod's mind, trained to silence such distractions, was forced into a battle between ingrained obedience and emerging uncertainty. This internal conflict ignited a silent storm. Psychologically, this can be understood as cognitive dissonance, the tension when one's actions or beliefs clash with new, uncomfortable truths. For Zod, it was a painful awakening to the limits of blind allegiance. Externally, the world around him began to shift too. Those who once praised his unwavering dedication started questioning his hesitation. Colleagues whispered about a change they could sense but not name. The system, built to reward compliance and punish deviation, now viewed him as a threat. The pressure to conform intensified, creating an overwhelming external conflict that mirrored his internal struggle. The cracks that began within were now reflected in the eyes of those around him. This rupture was more than a moment of doubt, it was a catalyst for transformation. Zod's identity, once solid and unquestionable, became fluid and unstable. The psychological process was painful and disorienting, like stepping into a storm without shelter. The rigid framework that had protected him also confined him, and as that frame began to crumble, Zod was forced to confront the cost of obedience. His mind wrestled with questions long suppressed. What happens when loyalty demands the sacrifice of self? Can one survive without losing who they are? The conflict escalated, a tug-of-war between the old and the new, the system and the self. And in this tension, everything began to shift. It was here, in this fragile space between control and chaos, that everything started to fall apart. As the years pressed on, the turmoil inside General Zod's mind evolved into a dark structure, a fortress built from shadows of doubt and rigid certainty. His internal conflict was no longer a wavering question but a new doctrine, forged from a cold calculus born in the crucible of his experiences. The obedient soldier had transformed into something else, a strategist of control, a mind sharpened by the paradox of power gained through submission. Zod's thoughts became a labyrinth of justifications and rationalizations. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried the weight of a man who believed his actions were necessary, even inevitable. Order is not chaos disguised, he would say, it is the only truth in a world drowning in uncertainty. To him, the system's strictness was not a cage but a shield, a defense against the unpredictable and the weak. Psychologically, this evolution mirrors what experts call authoritarian personality, where strict adherence to rules is a defense mechanism against internal fears and insecurities. Zod's world was black and white, nuance was a danger he could not afford. His mind was a fortress, yet within its walls lay a deep loneliness, a void left by the suppression of doubt and compassion. His loyalty was absolute, but it was also a prison. In conversations, Zod revealed the complexity of his transformation. When questioned about his unyielding stance, he would calmly explain, "I don't reject humanity, I redefine it. Strength is not in softness, but in the will to endure and command." These words hinted at a mind not broken, but reshaped, a mind where morality was bent to fit the logic of survival and control. The man who once blindly followed orders now authored his own harsh code. Yet, beneath this disciplined exterior, a part of Zod remained hidden even from himself, a shadow of vulnerability and fear. This concealed fragment of his psyche hinted that the true challenge was not to the system, but to his own fractured identity. The darkness he wielded was not just around him, but within. And still, the greatest threat lay dormant, waiting beyond the walls he had built. The real transformation, the awakening of the true monster, was yet to come. There comes a moment in every life when the line between right and wrong no longer holds firm, a moment when the familiar boundaries of morality dissolve into a gray fog, forcing a choice that changes everything. For General Zod, this moment arrived as a slow-burning reckoning, a fracture so profound it shattered the foundation of his beliefs and reshaped the very essence of his identity. The system he had devoted his life to, once absolute and unquestionable, now appeared flawed, fragile even. Yet paradoxically, this revelation did not weaken his resolve. Instead, it forged in him a new, unyielding determination to impose order, no matter the cost. This was the point of no return, the ultimate transgression not simply against an external world but against the very principles he once embodied. Zod rejected the traditional moral compass, discarding the shades of empathy and flexibility that once existed, replacing them with a cold, calculated logic. Order maintained through unwavering control, obedience secured not by respect but by fear and absolute authority. In his eyes, mercy and compromise were weaknesses, a luxury that the fragile structure of society could no longer afford. Psychologists describe this transformation as a form of moral disengagement, where individuals rationalize actions that would normally be unacceptable. Zod's mind wove intricate justifications to align his harsh actions with his perception of necessity. If we do not hold the reins tightly, he would insist, everything will descend into chaos, and the very fabric of civilization will unravel. This rationalization was more than strategy, it was a psychological fortress erected to shield himself from the vulnerability and doubt that had once threatened to undo him. The man and the system fused until they were indistinguishable, a singular force driven by a mission he believed transcended personal morality. Yet, this evolution raises an uncomfortable question that haunts the story: what if Zod is right? What if beneath the surface of fragile peace lies a dormant chaos waiting to explode? What if his ruthless order is the thin line holding back destruction? This unsettling dilemma forces the audience to reflect deeply on concepts of authority, obedience, and freedom. The boundary between protector and oppressor becomes perilously thin, and we are challenged to ask: who truly holds the moral high ground when survival demands harsh sacrifices? As Zod crossed this irrevocable boundary, his world became a battleground of clashing ideals. His once quiet doubts transformed into a storm of certainty that darkened every aspect of his life. The future no longer held promise but ominous uncertainty. The cost of maintaining order was not measured in victories or defeats but in the slow erosion of his own humanity. The question lingers in the silence between his calculated decisions: what price must be paid to uphold order when the price is the loss of compassion, flexibility, and ultimately, the self? This chapter leaves us standing at the edge of that precipice, forced to confront our own beliefs about control, sacrifice, and what it truly means to protect. If Zod believes he alone can save the world, who are we to challenge him? And in this question lies the true darkness. Not in Zod's actions, but in the reflection they cast back at us. To understand General Zod's actions, one must dive into the complex psychology that governs authoritarian figures, a mind where logic and emotion are intertwined in a delicate but often dark balance. Far from mere impulsiveness or madness, Zod's behavior reflects a calculated, cold reasoning that follows a strict internal logic. This logic is rooted in a fear of chaos and an intense desire to prevent disorder at all costs, no matter the ethical sacrifices required. Psychologists call this phenomenon authoritarianism, a personality structure characterized by rigid adherence to rules, unquestioning obedience, and the suppression of individual autonomy. Zod's worldview is shaped by this structure, where control is the ultimate goal because it is seen as the only way to maintain safety and stability. Studies show that individuals like Zod often emerge from environments where unpredictability and trauma have caused deep insecurity, leading to a desperate need for order. Scientific research also suggests that when individuals face overwhelming uncertainty or threat, the brain's fear response can trigger rigid thinking patterns, limiting empathy and flexibility. This neurological response helps explain Zod's unwavering stance. His brain prioritizes survival mechanisms that favor control over compassion. His decisions, harsh as they may seem, follow from this evolutionary impulse to secure a predictable environment. Comparing Zod to historical and fictional figures who embody similar traits reveals striking parallels. Like many authoritarian leaders, he rationalizes extreme measures as necessary evils. The psychological concept of moral disengagement explains how such individuals distance themselves from the ethical implications of their actions, allowing them to carry out difficult orders without inner conflict. Zod's cold calculation, therefore, is not cruelty born from malice but from a detached form of rationality aimed at what he perceives as the greater good. This chapter also uncovers a chilling revelation. Zod's actions are not chaotic impulses but the result of deliberate, strategic planning. Every step, every decree, every enforcement of obedience is part of a carefully crafted system designed to achieve total control. Far from being an uncontrolled force, he is a master of calculated order, a mind where logic reigns supreme. The unsettling truth is this: what appears as horror to some is, in Zod's mind, a necessary calculus. A price paid to keep the world from slipping into unpredictable darkness. It is not madness, he would say, but cold, unflinching calculation. This insight challenges the audience to reconsider the nature of order and chaos, and the fine line between protection and oppression. What remains after the storm has passed? After the dust settles from the relentless pursuit of order through control, what echoes linger in the world left behind by General Zod's actions? The legacy of his rigid vision is complex and far-reaching, touching every aspect of the society he sought to govern. The once unquestioned obedience has given way to a fractured reality, where the lines between security and oppression blur, leaving scars that resist healing. Zod's worldview, born from fear and hardened by necessity, reshaped not only the institutions around him but the very identities of those who lived under his rule. People adapted, some by submission, others by quiet rebellion. The psychological imprint of his reign is a lasting one, a collective consciousness marked by vigilance and a cautious distrust of freedom's unpredictability. This legacy forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about how deeply control can penetrate human life and thought. From a philosophical perspective, the story closes with an uneasy question about judgment and understanding. Who are we to condemn a man whose actions stem from a desperate desire to protect? Where does responsibility lie when the preservation of order comes at such great cost? This reflection challenges the audience to reconsider the nature of power and the ethical boundaries of leadership. Yet, the conclusion also suggests a new cycle, a haunting possibility that the myth of the unyielding protector, embodied by figures like Zod, is far from over. Systems built on fear and rigid control tend to repeat, their lessons unlearned as new generations face similar struggles. The story ends not with resolution, but with a lingering doubt. Perhaps he was not the last, nor the worst, but only the beginning of a pattern woven into the fabric of society itself. As the final scene fades, the audience is left with a chilling thought: the balance between order and chaos is fragile, and sometimes the guardians we trust may hold the keys to both salvation and destruction. The question that lingers is timeless and unsettling: how much control is too much, and when does protection become the greatest threat of all?